Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Ange Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 6 tight end rankings for the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're talking about all things tight end related. We're going to start off by talking about matchups at the position, which defenses are giving up the most points to opposing tight ends on a weekly basis in a half PPR scoring format. That's correct. All of our rankings throughout the week are half PPR based. For those of you who are looking for specific rankings, you go down in the description of the video and find the timestamps. After we talk about matchups, we will get into our top 16 tight end rankings. Before we begin, again, I cannot thank you guys enough. We just hit 30,000 subscribers. I felt like a lot of you were just holding your sub button. You wanted to be the one to get it over the 30,000 because we got way past that yesterday, and I can't thank you guys enough. It's been absolutely incredible, this journey, and you guys have been with me throughout the entire thing, so I really do appreciate it. I can't thank you guys enough. The next goal, we're moving. We're getting to 31K. Anyway, thank you again, guys. It's been awesome. So, on today's episode, we're starting off with the tight end position, talking about matchups in specific. So let's go ahead and let's start talking about that right away. So as you can see on screen, this is the teams that are giving up the most points to opposing tight ends thus far this year. The New Orleans Saints lead the pack by a wide margin, giving up 18.64 fantasy points to opposing tight ends. But one of their NFC South division rivals, the Atlanta Falcons, are not far behind. I mean, the fact that the Atlanta Falcons over the last couple of weeks have been giving up a ton of points bodes pretty well for the pair of Kyle Rudolph or Irv Smith. Now, Irv Smith this past week, Sunday Night Football, had himself a pretty good game, and there's a potential that he could take advantage of this. But, of course, nobody will be taking advantage of the New Orleans Saints matchup because they will be on bye this upcoming week. So will the Seattle Seahawks, the Los Angeles Chargers, and the Las Vegas Raiders. So, unfortunately, those four teams cannot be taken advantage of. But the Buffalo Bills, Travis Kelce playing them, that is a great matchup. Evan Engram, the thumbnail himself, playing against the Washington football team. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Of course, Mark Andrews playing against the Eagles. Eric Ebron versus the Cleveland Browns. The Dallas Cowboys, again, they're giving up a lot of points defensively to just about anyone. Unfortunately, Dan Arnold hasn't been much of an offensive piece for the Arizona Cardinals this year, so I don't think they'll be able to take advantage of that. At least TJ Hockenson coming off of a bye, playing against the Jacksonville Jaguars, that could be exciting. So those are the best matchups at the tight end position in terms of how many points they're giving up to opposing tight ends. I mean, a lot of these teams are giving up nearly a touchdown per game to opposing tight ends. And with the tight end position, the value of a touchdown itself could be the difference between being a top 15 or a top 5 guy just in one play. But regardless, I also wanted to mention some of the tougher matchups at the tight end position, which teams are not giving any points to opposing tight ends. The Indianapolis Colts, the New York Giants, Seattle Seahawks, Miami Dolphins, and Green Bay Packers, they have all been fantastic against opposing tight ends because either their safeties or linebackers have just been locking it down on a weekly basis. I mean, even though the New York Giants aren't one of the better defenses in the National Football League, they have been fantastic against opposing tight ends ever since week 1. They have really not given up anything regardless of the week, regardless of the opposing tight end. So that's always been nice to see. But either way, just giving you a little bit of perspective as to which matchups you want to be able to potentially key in on or potentially avoid this upcoming week. That's basically it. So now that we've covered that, we could talk about my top 16 tight end rankings on the week, starting off with my number 1 tight end here. Again, this should be quick. It's Travis Kelce. Shouldn't be a surprise. Playing against the Buffalo Bills, we just talked about it. They're giving up the third most points to opposing tight ends on a weekly basis. Now, in the last couple of weeks, we've seen opposing tight ends, and especially guys that are very talented, take advantage of the opportunity. Jonnu Smith, just earlier this week on Tuesday, 18.5 points against them. The week prior, Darren Waller had himself 11.3 points. The week prior to that, Mike Gesicki went for 23 points against the Buffalo's defense. So again, the tight end position against Buffalo has always been an advantageous matchup there. So Travis Kelce, the best tight end in the National Football League as of right now, coming off of a week where he had 12 targets, 8 catches for 108 yards and a touchdown, 20-point fantasy point week. Another one of these revenge games trying to redeem themselves for losing to the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, Travis Kelce, this offense, they're going to be good to go, especially with Sammy Watkins going down. I think that Mecole Hardman will potentially step up, but it also gives more targets potentially in the direction of Travis Kelce. My number 2 tight end on the week is Mark Andrews. And like I've mentioned before, the Philadelphia Eagles have been giving up a lot of points to opposing tight ends thus far this season. And though Eric Ebron didn't get the memo last week and Chase Claypool was the guy that was scoring all the touchdowns, I still think there is a great chance that Mark Andrews and his opportunity and his ceiling is definitely going to be able to take advantage of the matchup and have himself another great week. I mean, just this past week in Cincinnati, like he always plays well against Cincinnati, but regardless, 9 targets, 6 receptions, 56 yards, and a touchdown for 14.6 fantasy points. The last time we saw a really good tight end of the top 3 variety Kelce, Mark Andrews, or Kittle take on the Philadelphia Eagles, it was Kittle. He went for 15 catches, $183, and a touchdown. I'm not saying that's what Mark Andrews is capable of, but the ceiling is definitely going to be there. It's a very advantageous matchup. And the way that Lamar Jackson has been struggling as of late in the passing game, especially with his passing completion percentage and his yardage, hasn't gone over 200 passing yards in the past 3 weeks. He's going to have to continue to rely upon the short yardage gains of a Mark Andrews, which is obviously great for us fantasy owners. Moving on. We have ourselves George Kittle as our number 3 tight end. Again, the top 3 variety. These guys are always in this conversation. He plays against the Los Angeles Rams. George Kittle, since 2018, has not played bad against the Los Angeles Rams. In fact, here is the statistic of the day. George Kittle, in the past 4 matchups against the Los Angeles Rams in a half PPR scoring format, has produced 16.4, 14.3, 18.3, and 25.4 fantasy points in those 4 last matchups in 2018 and 2019. He never plays bad against the Rams. He's always played well, even though this past week against the Miami Dolphins, the matchup went haywire. The entire offense, when you pull Jimmy G, you shut down the entire offense there, and it just became a run blocking, I guess, fiesta at the end there. But regardless, last week he still had 8 targets. It's not as great as the 15 target game, but he'll get back on track, especially against the Rams, which he always dominates against. So we move on to our number 4, Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith's been incredible. Thus far this season, in the 4 games that they've played, he's had 5 receiving touchdowns. That's a lot in comparison to some of these other tight ends that are struggling to find the end zone. Regardless, the thing that I noticed about Jonnu Smith this season in comparison to last year, and I know the Tennessee Titans organization have been dealing with this COVID-19 situation, and it's definitely taken a couple players out of their starting lineups like Corey Davis and Adam Humphries. But that being said, the amount of average targets Jonnu Smith has gotten thus far this season is at about 7. 7 targets per game is fantastic, especially at the tight end position. But when we looked at what it is compared to last season, when Ryan Tannehill took over the job from weeks 7 through 17 of the 2019 season, Jonnu Smith was only seeing 3.6 targets per game. He's doubled that this year. He's become an even greater part of this offense in terms of the goal line opportunities and being able to at least take advantage of the play action with Derrick Henry and everybody stacking the box and run committing. It just opens up that much more for Jonnu Smith. He's been fantastic and one of the better options in this offense. Again, playing against the Houston Texans this week, not really a worry. He's a guy that is becoming matchup proof because of the offense itself, and it's great to see. He's just going to continue to succeed going forward. We have ourselves Evan Engram at number 5, the thumbnail himself. Now, a lot of people look at Evan Ingram's stat line last week and think, Andrew, why would you even remotely try to at least get him in the top 5 ranking? Like, it doesn't make sense. He hasn't proved or produced enough to earn that spot. Now, here's the conversation that we're going to have. Even though last week he had 2 targets, 1 reception for 16 yards and did nothing in the passing game, the New York Giants want to get him the ball. Absolutely, without a doubt, they want to get him the ball because not only did he have a rushing touchdown last week on the goal line, he had himself a touchdown on a fake field goal that was called back because of an illegal procedure, a little bit of a jump from an offensive lineman. If in fact that touchdown stands, we're talking about Evan Engram as a top 5 tight end, and that's why I'm bringing him here, because he plays against the Washington football team. That is an extremely advantageous matchup, and not only are they trying to get him the ball, whether it's on the goal line in the rushing game or passing him the ball, I think eventually Daniel Jones is going to get him the ball more often. And if and when he does, especially this upcoming week, he's going to be able to take advantage of it. We're going to see Evan Engram flourish a little bit more. So that's why I have him at 5 this week. We move on to TJ Hockenson coming off the bye week. Now, prior to the bye week, in the 4 games that the Detroit Lions have already played this season, TJ Hawkinson's almost at around a 10 fantasy point per game average. That is absolutely fantastic at the tight end position. He's on pace to finish within that top 6 category of the position. So if he continues to stay on track, that's fantastic. This upcoming week takes on an extremely advantageous matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think they were giving up the 8th most points to opposing tight ends this season. In the last couple weeks, Darren Fells, Mike Gesicki, and Jonnu Smith have all scored touchdowns against the Jacksonville defense. The consistency is always going to be there for TJ Hockenson because he is one of these goal line threats. And for the tight end position, you always want to be a guy that in the red zone is being, his numbers being called consistently. So we'll see that. And I think as his offense continues to improve, the easier matchups that we're having down the line for the Detroit Lions are pretty juicy. So I think because of the matchup, because the consistency of play, the targets are going to be there. TJ Hockenson, a top 6 play for sure this upcoming week. Moving on to Robert Tonyan. Now, last time we saw Robert Tonyan, again, prior to the bye week, played against the Atlanta Falcons. And there's a reason why the Atlanta Falcons are giving up the second most points, because they got battered by Robert Tonyan. Now, here's the thing. Robert Tonyan in the past 3 games has scored 5 total touchdowns. That is a number that a lot of wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, does not even matter, aren't able to get up to. The fact of the matter is, in the last 3 games, Robert Tonyan has had 14 targets, 13 receptions. That's fantastic in itself. 173 receiving yards and 5 receiving touchdowns. As of right now, he's the number 5 tight end in fantasy because of that touchdown upside. And he takes on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this week. I think it's a pretty decent matchup. I'm not 100% afraid of it. And I think the fact that Tampa Bay is so good in terms of stopping the run, it is just going to open up more opportunity for Aaron Rodgers to have to throw the ball, whether it is to Devontae Adams, MVS, and then eventually coming back to the running backs, and of course the tight end position with Robert Tonyan. He's becoming more and more of a utilized piece of this offense, and usually we don't see Green Bay have an efficient tight end on a weekly basis, but what Robert Tonyan's been able to produce, Aaron Rodgers really been getting him more involved, and I'm confident this upcoming week he could have similar value as the last couple weeks. All right, moving on, we have ourselves Mike Gesicki. Again, Mike Gesicki's been a little bit inconsistent. You know, he's fluctuated pretty heavily in our rankings thus far this season, but the question is, what Mike Gesicki are we going to see this upcoming week? Because they play against the New York Jets, and as of right now, the New York Jets aren't giving up that many points to opposing tight ends, but I think it's a little bit of a, I think the numbers are a little bit skewed in the wrong direction. Because of the early performances of Dan Arnold and Dawson Knox thus far this season against the Jets, both of them putting up nearly 0 points against that defense, it's pretty much scaled the New York Jets to look like they're a team that doesn't give up many points to opposing tight ends, which it really isn't the case. I mean, we go back a couple weeks, Jordan Reed had 2 touchdown catches on 8 targets, 7 receptions, 50 yards, great perfect game against them. And even Mo Alley Cox a couple weeks back down the goal line got himself some work, got himself a touchdown, and was fantasy relevant. So I think to myself, Mike Gesicki, a guy that is probably a top 3 receiving option in this offense, if not a top 2 down in the red zone goal line situations. I think Mike Gesicki in a really advantageous matchup in which the New York Jets are probably going to be on the back foot struggling against Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think Gesicki, a guy that last week 6 targets, 5 receptions for 91 yards, can continue on that pace and produce even more. Eric Ebron's my number 9. I had a lot of confidence in him last week, and I'm going to continue to have confidence in him. I know right now he's questionable with a hand injury. Obviously, we're going to monitor that as the week progresses, but he plays against the Cleveland Browns. And again, the Cleveland Browns have pretty much given up a good performance to a tight end every single week. I mean, starting from week 1 with Mark Andrews dropping a 20 bomb on them, they have consistently given up great performances. Obviously, it's nothing that they are really at fault for. The injuries of their secondary have definitely hurt them. Their safety play has not been good enough to be able to stop the tight end position, and unfortunately, they haven't been able to at least fill in somebody to be able to lock that down. But regardless, I think Eric Ebron is always going to be a red zone threat regardless of the situation. Hopefully we'll see more usage out of him. He unfortunately fumbled this past week and gave away possession, but I still think that between him and this offense, if Deontay Johnson's going to be missing, I know Juju Smith-Schuster's been a little bit banged up, there's always an opportunity for Eric Ebron to step up this week in a pretty advantageous matchup. We have ourselves Jimmy Graham at number 10. Of course, Jimmy Graham has been the goal line red zone threat for this team. They've gone down there over the last couple of weeks, and Nick Foles knows where to go with the ball. The opportunity is definitely in the direction of Jimmy Graham, and that's all you want to see. You want touchdown upside. You want the opportunity there because a player like Jimmy Graham, who feasts in the red zone and has had seasons in the past where he's 10-plus touchdowns, he could definitely be a part of that conversation as we progress throughout the weeks. Playing against Carolina isn't one of the easier matchups, but again, the opportunity is there, and that's all I'm looking for. As we progress through the tight ends that we talk about as we continue, we're going to see less and less opportunities from these guys. Therefore, they're going to be far less viable in terms of fantasy productivity this upcoming week. But I think the matchup, the opportunity he's been getting, the fact that, in my opinion, he's probably the number 3 receiving option on that team going forward seems like a pretty good recipe for success for Jimmy Graham. We have ourselves Dalton Schultz at 11. I know there are a lot of mouths to feed in that Dallas offense, but Dalton Schultz has proven to be a pretty good fantasy commodity thus far this year. So, sure, there's a possibility that Andy Dalton completely ignores him. But let's not forget, Andy Dalton, Tyler Eifert, a couple years back in Cincinnati, that was a pretty good combination especially down in the red zone. So if in fact he goes to Dalton Schultz multiple times down in the red zone, I'm not going to be surprised. I'm looking for him to get a little bit more usage than he of course had last week. Was practically a no-show last week. But again, you can go ahead and leave him on your bench if you want. If you want to kind of keep an eye on him, see exactly what he's going to be able to do against Arizona and then progress throughout the weeks. But as of right now, I have a lot of confidence that he could potentially get himself some pretty good work in this offense that's going to be throwing the ball a lot, trying to keep up with Arizona's offense themselves. We move on to Noah Fant at number 12. The reason Noah Fant is at 12 is because obviously he's coming off injury. Drew Lock is coming off injury, and they play against New England. So it's definitely a tough matchup. I think Noah Fant has already proven himself to be a great tight end this year. I mean, in the first 3 weeks of the season, this was a guy that was in that top 5 tight end conversation in terms of total fantasy points, on top of the fact that he had a lot of targets. He had 21 targets in the first 3 weeks. That's fantastic numbers. I mean, 7 targets per game. That's exactly what you want for the tight end position on a weekly basis. So as long as we continue to see opportunity like that, his quarterback's coming back, we're going to get a little bit more stability in terms of targets in his direction. He's going to be healthy. I know Bill Belichick locks down tight ends, so that's why we dropped him at 12, but I still have confidence that he could be a good potential play this week and get himself some good yardage going into this week. It may be a lucky touchdown. Gerald Everett's my number 13. Tyler Higbee is just, he's gone. He is literally, he's the invisible man in that offense. Sure, he'll get like 2 or 4 targets in a game, but Gerald Everett is continuing this, at least go in the right direction in comparison to Tyler Higbee, who's going in the completely opposite direction in terms of opportunity. And sure, as of right now, the fact that both these guys are healthy, they're going to use Tyler Higbee as a blocking threat because that is what he's originally known for. He hasn't been known for catching the ball 10 times a game. That was a complete anomaly at this point comparatively to what we've seen this year. So Gerald Everett could get back to being more of a receiving threat for this team. The way that San Francisco struggled in their secondary last week in terms of their injuries, I think there's a good chance that Gerald Everett could take advantage of it and have himself a pretty good week here as my number 13. Moving on, we have ourselves Zach Ertz. Now, he's been horrible. His targets have been there, but he has just not been the same. I'm waiting for Dallas Goedert to come back to officially bury the entire fantasy value of Zach Ertz, but I still have hope. I have to have hope. I mean, this has been a guy that every single year has been a top 3 tight end for the last 4 years. And on a consistent basis, regardless of the quarterback, has been a huge part of this offense. I don't know what to expect. I'm expecting Doug Peterson to maybe get him the ball more often, give him more opportunities, but he's on some sort of tilt and nobody's helping him get out of it. Neither is Carson Wentz, which is just unfortunate. All right, we have ourselves Cameron Brate as our number 15. When we look at Cameron Brate and his potential upside, of course, the upside sits in the range of, okay, Gronk's on the field, but they still need opportunities and receivers to at least step up in said offense. I mean, when we look around and we see, okay, Scotty Miller's been banged up. They're using 3rd and 4th string wide receivers. Justin Watson's been banged up. We need somebody to step up and be a receiving threat. With O.J. Howard gone, it's not going to be Gronk. It has to be Cameron Brate. This past week, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 44 receiving yards, playing against Green Bay this week. Green Bay's got some pretty good linebackers and safeties in terms of coverage, so it's definitely going to be a tougher matchup, but I still think that down in the goal line, some play action opportunities there with Brady. He's done it already this season where he's caught a touchdown. I think Cameron Brate's got a pretty decent option, with of course all these tight ends like Hunter Henry, Darren Waller out this upcoming week from the bye weeks. It's definitely going to play a pretty big factor. Even Jared Cook. The last option I wanted to mention, and somebody that I mentioned during waiver wire segment earlier this week, is Irv Smith Jr. Now, here's the thing. Irv Smith, again, is supposed to be the starting tight end for this team in the future, but as of right now, last year had the exact same numbers as Kyle Rudolph. Didn't really get much opportunity, but Kyle Rudolph has kind of disappeared this year. And hopefully I'm expecting to see more opportunity from Irv Smith. This past week against the Seattle Seahawks, which are a pretty good team against the tight end position, he still was able to produce 5 targets, 4 receptions for 64 receiving yards, 8.4 fantasy points. He takes on the second most advantageous tight end matchup this week against the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, they're giving up unbelievable points. I mean, starting off from this season, they gave up 10 points to Greg Olsen, 17 points to Dalton Schultz, 21 points to Jimmy Graham, and 30 points to Robert Tonyan. This past week, of course, Carolina doesn't have any tight ends, so they weren't able to take advantage of it. But my goodness, this is a really advantageous matchup, and I really like the potential of Irv Smith Jr. this upcoming week, and that's why I mentioned him. Anyway, these are my top 16 tight ends on the week. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. Make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you have not yet already. We're going to be making fantasy football content for the entirety of the 2020 season. Do not forget, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Sunday morning, kickoff with Kirchhoff. Make sure you show up. Stay healthy. Enjoy your week. Thank you guys. There's no Thursday night football game today. Remember that. So don't worry about lineups. I appreciate you guys. Thank you very much. Later this afternoon, quarterback video. Until then, I'll see you guys. Peace.